Okay, hello everyone. Um, Gus is traveling this week, so it's just going to be me. So I will wait for a few minutes for more people to join, and then we will begin. Hey, hello. So as I said, Gus is traveling, so it's going to be just me today. So it's probably going to be a short space without all the interruptions and Gus talking all the time. I'm joking, of course, but still. We are going to talk today about three things. First of all, we're going to talk about Web3, and I will share some thoughts that I have on the concept and what I think are the three most important reasons why we do want Web3 in our lives and why we should build it and develop it. And then we are going to segue to Beam Hackathon announcements and talk about what we have planned for the hackathon that we want to have at the end of the summer. And eventually we're going to answer questions that we kind of didn't answer the last time because we didn't have enough time. So finally we will address all these questions. So let's get started. So recently we have seen some interesting things happening. And I'm talking about what's happening with Twitter recently and what's happening with Reddit. And what I wanted to kind of emphasize is that the reason we are talking about Web3 today is mostly because of the success of Web2. For the last 15 years or so, we've been living in this Web2 era. And what happened is that more and more of our lives actually became dependent and digitized, and we rely on these platforms for many different things. So Twitter, for example, is absolutely amazing platform for sharing news and information, and we go there to read like opinions of people and to know what happened. And so we basically treat it as this kind of place that we go to every day, right? Like this one for those who use Twitter, it's I think integral part of many people's lives. So when we see this recent kind of changes, right? So suddenly the API prices go up, so we no longer can afford developing some of the applications that we used to be kind of using every day. And then there are a lot of interesting limitations, rate limiters. So now if you're not a paying customer of Twitter, you can only see 600 or 800 or 1,000 tweets per day. And if you are a paying customer, so it's a little bit more. And if you're not logged in, you can or cannot see tweets depending on the day. And the problem here is that not only are we not kind of, asked about it, obviously, it's a private company or like it does whatever it wants. But in addition to what actually is happening in terms of like which decisions are made, I think one of the more annoying aspects is how those decisions are made and how they are communicated and the general behavior of these platforms. And I'm talking specifically about these two recent examples of Twitter and Reddit. It's what kind of indicates and puts us in perspective what we can actually expect from these platforms. So you wake up one morning and then Elon Musk tweets that, listen, from today, it's going to be a limit on how many tweets you can see per day, right? It's your tweets, you wrote them, all of the content on this platform is user generated, right? Twitter is just a platform where people connect with each other and talk with each other, but it's up to the platform to decide who can do what, who can see what. If it's something that they like, they can ban you, they can deplatform you, right? And if you in any way your income depends on that platform, then, who cares? You will just remain without that income. And this behavior is very kind of feudalic, I would say, in nature. Like, it's like, okay, yeah, you're here, but it's not your platform, right? You don't decide anything. You just kind of do whatever we tell you. And when it's about like things like Twitter, it's not just, social media or a platform that I just, use for entertainment so I can switch to another platform. It's a lot more than that today, because on this platform, you have your social graph, which means all of the people that you follow. If you bookmark things, if you just use it to save information or use it as a reference of sorts, if you are banned from the platform, obviously you don't have your access to your bookmarks, you don't have access to information, right? And it can change every day. Obviously, like, you're no longer like able to participate if you're on the platform. So what I'm trying to say is that it's more than just kind of, another application that you can easily, throw away and move to another one. It's something that you are pretty much dependent on for your information and for many things that you're doing every day. The same story is very true for Reddit. So what happened in Reddit is that in their attempts to monetize the platform, they have raised the API prices. And they have raised the API prices so high so that a lot of third-party applications that use those APIs and provided useful features and had their users could not survive anymore and could not afford to continue their operation. So they had to shut down. And as a result, there was a protest and a lot of communities went to the blackout. So the moderators closed the community, so people were no longer able to write or find answers that they were looking for, because Reddit, as we know, is one of the great sources for answers to very specific and like nuanced questions that sometimes you cannot find anywhere else. And there is a Reddit community for basically any subject on earth. And in order to fight these communities that went to the blackout, Reddit as a platform started threatening, changing moderators, doing all kinds of tricks to open the content back, because after all, their income and their survival depends on the content that the users wrote. However, they never considered kind of a more political and more like polite approach to try to, talk through those decisions and find solutions in order to allow these applications that depend on their APIs to continue living, right? So these are just two examples, and we see a lot more happening. Threads, which is the opportunistic competitor for Twitter, just recently launched from Facebook, from the creators of Facebook and Instagram. Immediately, there are like a lot of stories about how much information is collected by this application and what they do censor and what they don't censor. So what I'm trying to say is that the world's changed. The world changed, and Web2 is no longer just a technology stack. It's a way of governing basically a lot of our day-to-day activities. Now, this is the first part, right? The first part of, okay, so why Web3? Because control. Who controls this, right? Who controls your access? Who controls your behavior, etc.? And I'm not even talking about, filtering and promoting content and all of that. Like that's bad too. But I'm just talking about waking up one day to discover that the platform that you used for a long time suddenly changed the rules and you cannot do anything about it. The second part is about your data, because after all, it's you who are creating this content. It's in many ways, you are the key, as a user, you are the key provider of content to most of these platforms, right? They don't write articles. They depend on you to write, to share, to like, to follow, to do all of these activities. However, when you encounter the situation and you look under the hood, you understand that it's actually not in your control. You don't control the data that you have created. You not necessarily can back it up. You cannot necessarily move it to another platform. For example, now people that are joining Threads after they've been disappointed by Twitter, they have to start basically from scratch, right? So they have to connect their social graph, find all the people. They cannot move content. They cannot do anything. I think they don't know about a way to easily export data from Twitter. And it's a problem, because you are not leasing, you're using somebody else's resources. And yes, you don't pay for them, which is how they basically say, okay, you don't pay for this, for any of it. So you kind of cannot claim ownership of this data, because we store it for you, we provide it for you, right? That's how it works. And it's kind of no longer just, about, some having fun. It's really much more organic part of our lives. And when we encounter these situations, we say, wait a second. Okay, so yeah, let's say I do pay for some of it. And if I do want control. I do want to be able to download all my data. I do want to be able to migrate it to another platform if I want to. I want more control about things that are basically mine, even though they are stored with somebody else's machine. And this is something that Web2 cannot provide today. The third point is censorship. And we see it today, and there are interesting examples coming, or statements coming from France following the recent events there, about how social media is presenting or spreading information about those events. And some of the people maybe are in government are not really satisfied with the way that things are presented or information that's being spread. So yeah, like let's censor that. And I'm not even talking about less sophisticated countries like Russia, God forbid, or whatever, like where none of that is actually, possible, and you can be in jail for just tweeting something or liking a picture. So all of these things together, they bring us to a situation where we say, do we really want to continue using this model for much longer? And if we want something else, how would it look like? So this is where Web3, or at least the promise of Web3 for me, comes into perspective. Because if you Google Web3, if you look over articles and websites that talk about Web3, you will see a wide range of different definitions and kind of things that are tied into this umbrella term. But just to be specific, what I'm talking about, I'm not talking about DeFi. I'm not talking about financial applications. I'm not talking about tokenization of anything. I'm mostly talking about decentralized, non-financial applications, whether it's about communication, whether it's about, looking for a job, or just, storing your data in a decentralized location. So for me, Web3 is the same kind of service that you have in Web2, but much more decentralized and much more kind of in your control as a person. So this is kind of the idea. Now, when we approach this and we take a look at the landscape today of what Web3 kind of gives us in this specific domain, we see a few things. So first of all, the technology that made this entire concept possible is essentially a derivative of the same ideas that are used in cryptocurrencies, right? So starting from Bitcoin many years ago, where suddenly there was an option to have a decentralized money and a system that is not controlled by a single entity or even group of entities, a protocol which is ruled by a very wide consensus. And obviously Bitcoin became very popular, and today we see kind of the next, I would say, step, or the next phase of adoption of Bitcoin, because when Beam started back in 2018, the question was whether Bitcoin will or will not survive. Today, I think it's obvious that Bitcoin is here to stay. And these ideas of creating decentralized systems that use blockchain as their kind of ledger to synchronize different activities, and with any consensus mechanism that's available, whether it's proof of work or proof of stake, eventually you get this decentralized system that can agree on results of specific transactions. The same ideas are being transferred to many different areas. And for example, earlier today, I had an interview with a project that operates in the space of recruiting, right? So basically, they're trying to provide Web3 solutions for people looking for workers, or people looking for jobs. And it makes a lot of sense because once again, if you compare the model of Web2, where LinkedIn, I think, is kind of the best known example, there is a clear and very kind of well-defined issue with having all of your professional network and all of your information. And today, once again, I don't use LinkedIn too often, but many people use it as a sort of professional social platform where they post their opinions and articles, and there is also a level of content in addition to just kind of uploading your resume and following, connecting to people that you know professionally. All of that does not belong to you today, right? You are not in control of which information is, kind of who can access it, what are the rules exactly. They can change something tomorrow. And even though, if you're not paying for LinkedIn, you're just using it regularly, you have this set of features, and it does help you in many ways, you still kind of get this feeling that maybe it would be much better to have maybe less things. Like, for example, I completely can live without articles on LinkedIn. But I do want to be able to create my professional social graph and to reach developers and to talk to people in a more decentralized way. Yes, maybe it will mean uploading less pictures because they pay for a huge amount of storage and huge amounts of traffic to serve you all of these great kind of, beautiful and high resolution content. But you pay not only in, watching ads or actually paying for subscription to these services, but you also pay in your inability to control what will happen to you. By the way, I didn't personally hear stories about somebody being banned from LinkedIn. I don't know what you need to do exactly to get to this point. So if you heard about such stories, please let me know, tweet about them, and tag me. But I believe that it can be very, very harmful, right? It can be very harmful if suddenly you cannot access your LinkedIn. I live in Israel, and I do have a lot of experience in both looking for work and looking for developers in Israel. And I would like to say that for many organizations, the fact that you don't have a LinkedIn account is a red flag, right? So if they are getting your resume through a recruiter and they are looking up like in LinkedIn and they don't see you there, it's like, whoa, wait a second, what's going on here, right? Why is this person missing, right? So if you are banned for any reason, it could really and significantly harm not just your chances of, or kind of your process of looking for developers or your process of looking for a job, but also the fact that you will get it. They will say, this person was banned from LinkedIn, like, do we want to hire this person? And this in itself is a problem, right? So I really appreciate the effort of these projects that are doing Web3 solutions, private Web3 solutions for these areas. Now, if we're talking about technology today, and we know that most of the blockchains are not private, like most of heavily used blockchains that provide smart contracts and allow you to create decentralized applications, they have little to none, almost no privacy whatsoever. And one of the interesting things that we have discovered during our time here in Beam and building stuff is that, and it might sound strange, but people are much more, I would say, aware of their privacy when it's about their lives, and less when it's about monetary things and trading, especially on DeFi. So what I'm trying to say is that the person could easily go on Ethereum and buy a bunch of tokens and trade them and buy a bunch of NFTs and sell them without any concern of who can see those transactions or who can monitor their wallets and who can, know what they have and what they're doing with their funds. But if they are in a situation where they have to disclose more personal information about themselves, about their families, about their professional interests, they are much more aware of that, and they don't do this as easy. Like it might sound strange, but that's the fact of life. That's what we saw. Now, on the other hand, the very process, and once again, this example of looking for a job, I think it's a very good one, because you would not necessarily want just anyone to be able to see immediately that you began looking for a job, right? You're currently employed in the company, you're starting to look around, you're not very satisfied, you want to see if there are any other options or other interesting projects. You don't want, your boss to see this immediately, so you do need some privacy in this regard. Now, in the Web2 world, this privacy is provided by the rules of the system that you are operating in. Like in case of LinkedIn, you, for example, probably are not going to change your profile to looking for a job, right? Probably you're going to connect to some recruiters, send them direct messages, talk to them. Maybe you will kind of more accurately indicate your interest or submit your resume to several positions. And this information is kept private from other people on the network. And this is the rules that, LinkedIn enforces for you. And once again, they know, right? They know what you're doing. And if you have any kind of control or any access to their internal data, obviously all of their employees have that, so they can leak that information as well. So it's not real privacy. It's kind of more what I call a big guy privacy, right? The small guys cannot see, but the big guys can. And it's a problem in and of itself. But we do understand that in all of these situations, privacy is not just a feature, it's an essential part of the process. Take salary negotiation, for example. When you're negotiating about your salary, you don't want to make this negotiation public. Not because you are ashamed or whatever, but for many different reasons, but that's not how things work, right? So we have to agree that privacy is absolutely essential in this case. Now, when you are trying to bring existing models that work well in Web 2 to Web3 world in a naive way, that's one of the barriers that you're going to immediately encounter. Another interesting example that was on Twitter a couple of days ago, talking about selling tickets, right, as NFTs. And it's a good point that when you sell a ticket as NFT, anyone can trace those NFTs, see who bought the ticket, see what they're doing, like where, like how much money they have, and a lot of information that do not necessarily need to be exposed when you're just buying a ticket to an event. On Ethereum, you don't have any other choice. You need to either do a lot of this off-chain, which, once again, is bad for decentralization and exactly not the point that Web3 is trying to make. Or if you're doing this on-chain, you're exposing a lot of information. So the reason I mentioned all of these things is because I think Beam today is very well positioned to address a lot of those issues. Specifically because not only does it have smart contracts and you can build decentralized applications, but also because it has privacy by default. And it's exactly the privacy that you want in this case, right? So it's not about, like, you can say, oh, if you're doing confidential transactions, maybe you're hiding something from tax authorities or whatever, maybe you're funding bad people. But when you're talking about, salary negotiation process, looking for a job, buying tickets, all of these things are much more kind of simple for anyone to understand that, privacy is an essential part of this process. Now, since Beam has all of the building blocks already, working on the mainnet, starting from, SBBS, for example, which allows you to send messages between wallets, smart contracts that allow you to create kind of business logic that's verifiable on chain, confidential NFTs, so you can, create something and don't know who bought it exactly. There is no identity information. Confidential assets, so if you want to create a new token for any purpose, you can do that as well. Not to mention IPFS integration, but you can also store data on the decentralized network. So all of these things and the APIs that Beam provides to access all of these features make it very easy to take Beam as a platform and to integrate it in many, many different types of applications, which are not necessarily financial applications, but on the other hand, they can and need some support for like transactional activity. Like, for example, when we're talking about tickets, obviously it's much easier to buy the ticket directly on chain and then still enjoy the privacy instead of doing this kind of part Web 2, part Web 3 scenarios that you would have to do if you're using Ethereum or any blockchain that's not confidential. So with that in mind, I think one of the directions, in addition to DeFi, obviously, and to other applications that we already have and are still working on, one of the directions that I think have a lot of potential for Beam is to be used as this kind of very robust and sophisticated backbone for non-financial applications. Now, with that in mind, and because of all of these considerations, I would like to segue to the hackathon that we will be talking about for a while. But I think now it's a good opportunity to do something interesting here, and I'll tell you what we had in mind. And obviously, all of your opinions are welcome, and we're going to publish articles and discuss it a lot. But the idea is this. There is a protocol called Noster, and I don't know how many of you heard about it. I have only started looking kind of deeper into this protocol recently, It caught my attention after this whole Twitter fiasco with rate limiting and all the other weird decisions that are being made and imposed. When people started to look for alternatives, this is one of the protocols that were mentioned quite a lot, and I looked into it. So Nostr is a protocol for decentralized social networks. It works by combining two kind of types of software. There are clients, obviously, that you can use to write messages, send messages, etc., follow people. And there are also relays which collect all this information and send it, distribute it between other relays, and it works as a decentralized network. It does not use blockchain in its native form. In general, Nostr is more about protocol specifications, which are really well documented and built in this kind of, it's called the NIP, Nostr Improvement Proposals. So when you go to the website and you go to the documentation, you see this nicely organized repository with all of the protocol specifications built incrementally. So we have this basic specification, then on top of it, all kinds of improvements. Some of them, by the way, talk about privacy in general. But what made my kind of decision to look even deeper into it is when I saw that Edward Snowden has Nostr public key in his Twitter account, and Jack, the Twitter Jack, who is currently working on another project called Blue Sky, which is closed to invitation only, and you can get an invitation. So he also has Nostr public key on his Twitter page. So I created a Nostr account. It's very simple. You just generate a public key pair using a specific standard that they have defined in the protocol. And now you have an account, right? You can use it to log in into different interesting services that are built on top of Nostr. You can use it with several different clients. I'm using the one on iOS. It's called Damus, as in like Nostradamus. It works well. Looks like very early kind of version of Twitter in a sense. It's relatively small in terms of like you cannot find too many people there yet, and also the search is not working really well because decentralized search is difficult to build, and centralized search requires infrastructure that it's not yet there, but it will get there. So what I thought to myself is that maybe what we can do is we can make a hackathon to build decentralized applications using Beam infrastructure and Nostr as a protocol. So how could it work? For example, as of today, the SBBS API is not exposed directly to the application. So, for example, Beam Messenger that we have recently added to the wallet, it's a hardcore feature of the wallet. It's implemented in C++, like in wallet internals, and it allows you to send custom SBBS messages between different wallets, but it's not exposed to the dApps, right? So you cannot write a dApp today that uses web technology, which is much simpler to master and a lot more people know it, and send a custom SBBS message. So what I said, like we can do is we can expose this API. We already have IPFS API exposed, so you can store this information. You can decide for which duration, which network, like whether it's going to be closed IPFS network or a global one. And we can use SBBS as a transport layer and basically create all kind of interesting applications that use Nostr protocol, run on top of SBBS, and allow you to almost convert or like add the Nostr client functionality to Beam Wallet. So that was the original idea. Now, in addition to obvious things like sending messages, following people, and creating groups and group chat and things like that, it's very interesting to explore how these capabilities can be integrated with other applications on Beam, or maybe create new applications that combine functionality that will today have with smart contracts and confidential transactions and the capabilities that Nostr provides. And one of the interesting features that I think is very popular and made Nostr protocol kind of a favorite of Bitcoin people is that Nostr protocol integrates with Lightning Network, and you can send tips to other people on Nostr using Lightning Network. They're called zaps. So if you're like looking into Nostr clients, some of them support zaps. There was even an issue with the Apple Store that they didn't like the fact that some of the clients had this functionality because they don't like when there are payments inside the application that don't go through Apple ecosystem and stuff like that. We can do the same. We can do the integrations that allow you to do a lot of interesting kind of not just tips like donations, transactions, stores, for example, based on Nostr and using Beam ecosystem. And with the fact that everything is private, you can, in my opinion, handle a lot of interesting use cases that would be much more problematic in in other blockchains or like without the blockchain. So this is the direction. So with what we said we're going to do is we're going to we'll publish obviously an article that explains exactly what our plans for the hackathon are. We're going to discuss it in the community before we publish the final version. We thought about allocating the last 2 weeks of August, say between August 17th and August the 31st of August, for this kind of hackathon time. Before that, we are going to promote and send information about the hackathon everywhere we can, and try to attract developers. We will provide an additional Telegram channel to register, and then we will have the kickoff meeting, first of all, probably a couple because of the time zone issues. And then we're going to have a tutorial that will explain to developers that choose to participate what can be done, how things can be implemented. Since it doesn't require any intervention in the internals, anyone who has any knowledge of web development, starting from basic JavaScript and up to React, Angular, Vue, or any other framework, will be able to implement and build decentralized applications on Beam that will use this functionality. So this is the plan, like in broad strokes. We are going to provide several challenges that we are going to discuss together, and those are going to be the official challenges. Basically, if you don't have an idea what to build, we will say, okay, so this is the challenge and you can apply to this challenge. And if you have an idea to build something of your own, obviously we can discuss that, and we'll provide all the necessary support. If it requires a smart contract, we will help you build one, and things like that, right? So this is the process, and I think it's good to have this kind of not just about Beam, but also to since it uses the Nostr protocol, I think it will be interesting for the Nostr community. And I was very impressed by the amount of various different projects that are built in and around Nostr. I mean, like I've been about a week, into looking into the project, and I still find new applications, new services that use it. So I think it's a very high quality community in general, people who understand already the interest and the need for decentralization. And I'm sure a lot of them are also going to appreciate the need for privacy in many different applications. Since this protocol is very flexible, it can be extended in some ways. It does not necessarily, require you to build a social network. You can do a lot of different things with that. Earlier today, I played some chess against a bot through a Nostr protocol. I was winning, so probably means it's not a very strong bot, but still, right? It was very nice. So we can do all that because, as you know, Beam decentralized application is exactly as powerful as a web application of any kind. Only difference is that it communicates directly with Beam blockchain and allows you to create transactions. The keys that you create for Nostr are using the same elliptic curve as Bitcoin and Beam. So you can create a Nostr identity using your Beam seed in a way. So yeah, I think it has this idea has a lot of potential, and once again, we will present it in a more organized way, but that's kind of the direction that we thought to take this hackathon. and if it goes well, obviously it's going to be the first of many. So that's kind of the idea. Please let us know what you think about it in any way possible. Telegram, Twitter, Nostr. I have added my Nostr ID in my Twitter account as well. So you can just copy this long key and install any client you like on Nostr, find me and talk to me there as well. It's pretty, quiet there for now. Would be nice to talk to someone there as well. And also you're obviously welcome to look into their ecosystem, look into the clients and see what they're doing. I think it's very nice, has a lot of potential, even though a lot of work is still kind of needs to be done. But eventually I think this direction is definitely the future, right? So this is where I think things are going. I'm not going to talk about all kinds of problems that need to be overcome on the roads for true decentralization, where the platform is just a platform and it's just for serving your data and storing your data and providing all kinds of basic domain and email services. But I will leave it for another time, maybe. But at least it's clearly this direction is clearly much better in many regards for the important things, for the ownership of the data, for the censorship resistance, for privacy eventually, and for your freedom and how you can use this your data and how you can interact with the world in this new, more decentralized and Web3 way. Okay, so that's about that. Let me find the questions that were raised quite a while ago, and we will go over them. And if you have any additional questions, by the way, please feel free to ask them as well, here or anywhere else. Okay. So, the first question was about the hackathon, and we have talked about that. The second question is about launching some additional DAO votes, because, so we do have on-chain voting in the DAO. It's been used very infrequently, I would say. And it's a good idea to make kind of more, I would say, more organized process of voting on things periodically, just to keep this model useful, especially BMX. One of the things that we talked about and we need to do still is to implement the second type of proposals. I said it many times before, I know, and we need to get to this point. And one of the reasons is that indeed, it's not clear today for most people how BMX is used and why would anyone need it, what's the value in BMX. So yes, it's an effort that we definitely need to do. What I suggest is that obviously we need help with that, right? It's very, very simple. If you see something in Beam that is not moving forward, it means it's stuck somewhere. It may be in my head and maybe somewhere else. But there are two things that can help. First is nagging, and I really appreciate your nagging. I really appreciate you reminding us about things that we keep postponing or forget about. Please keep doing that. It's great. And the second one is constructive suggestions. So if you think about a vote that you would like to have, right? Can be anything. Please raise this issue, on the forum or in community where we're more present and we're more responsive. and then once you make a suggestion, then keep lagging about the suggestion. It works. Believe me, like people who are longtime members of a great Beam community, they know that it works, and please keep doing that. One of those things that finally are going to happen next week is the reallocation of the BeamX that was initially supposed to go to the Beam Ifrit pool, and we screwed that up, and we allocated all of the BeamX that we wanted to a single pool, which is Beam BeamX, and we kind of forgot or missed the Beam Ifrit pool. So yeah, it requires an upgrade to the smart contract that's allocating these funds, and we're going to do this next week. I don't think we need to vote about this again, but we will create kind of a reminder to the community that that's what we're doing, just in case somebody has any additional comments. And connected to that is also a proposal to reward some of the bridges, because as you know, the liquidity on the bridges right now is very low. So basically, it's incentivizing people to move Ethereum into Beam Ethereum and maybe USDT to Beam USDT by providing additional incentive on the bridge, right? So if you're using the bridge and you move a liquidity, you get additional yield in return. So that's also an option. It's probably going to be also interesting once the reverse bridges are launched, which I hope really is going to happen very soon, because it's like the solution is ready and we're just waiting to launch it. I would like to promise that it's going to be next week. It could be next week. I really try to push it for it to be next week, but there are some external factors that, maybe it's going to be 2 weeks, but that's where it stands, right? It's all tested, it's all working. It's just about the deployment. And then you will be able to also move confidential assets on, like, from Beam, starting from Beam itself through the bridge to Ethereum, a wrapped asset on Ethereum, and then trade it without privacy, but with more liquidity and more user base, obviously. And then we could talk about adding additional assets to that list as well. Okay, so that was about the questions about the DAO. The following question is about the offline transactions. Does a offline transaction address ever expire? So the answer is no, it doesn't expire. And there are two types of offline transaction addresses. There is a public offline transaction, which is generated once per seed. Right now, the wallet by default only allowed to generate a single address of this type. And obviously, this address can be used at any time by anyone at any point without you having to be online or having your wallet open or even installed, and they can send you funds. The second type of the address is the regular offline transaction, and it uses this system called vouchers for each offline deposit that somebody made, or the transaction sent, one of these vouchers is getting spent. And initially there is some number that's generated inside the address once you create a new offline address. It includes a set of vouchers. I don't remember the exact amount, let's say 10. And then it means that using this address, by default, you can get 10 offline payments. And after that, you will need to either create a new address and send it, or if both of the wallets are online at the same time, or like within 12-hour period, then the wallets know how to refresh these addresses. So they communicate using SBBS, and they get a new set of vouchers for these transactions. So once you have a voucher, which is active in your hand, it never expires. But if you're using public offline, it's unlimited. You can send any amount of transactions without wallet ever being online. If you're using regular offline transactions, then it's limited to the number of vouchers that you got. It's a technical nuances that have to do with some implementation details which are not very important. It's exactly the same type of transaction for you almost, but that's how it works. The last question that I have here on this list is about whether the sender can manually revoke a transaction which was sent to offline address. So the answer is no. One of the key differences in Mimblewimble online transactions is that there are two parts of the transaction. So the sender kind of sends something to the receiver signs, returns it to sender, and then the sender signs and sends it to the blockchain. So when the sender sends a transaction, before the receiver had a chance to sign it, we had implemented this option to cancel a transaction. In most blockchains, this option does not exist, right? You send a transaction, but it's gone. But if the receiver didn't have a chance to sign, then it still can be canceled. Once the receiver signed, it can no longer be canceled because you don't know exactly what the receiver will do. It can, the receiver finish their job, and they can also send their transaction to the blockchain. So you cannot assume that the transaction will not be sent and you cannot cancel it. So since in the offline transactions, it's more similar to what you're used to in Bitcoin, those transactions cannot be canceled. Once you send it, and one of the nodes could have received it, and then it will be mined. So the cancel operation is no longer applicable, even if receiver was not online or available this time. Yeah, so these are the questions that I have on this list. Let me see if we have anything else in the community channel. Okay, we don't. So as I said, it's going to be a short one, 10 minutes early. Nobody's talking. It's all quiet, which is nice. Okay, so just to summarize, and I'm not going to waste your time repeating things. I think that Web3 is a very interesting direction to take. I think there is a lot to be done. I think there is a lot of need for privacy in Web3 space. We see it every day. We see like a lot of projects that can try to tackle all kinds of real world scenarios and applications, and suddenly they say, wait a second, we can't do this without privacy. Unlike DeFi traders, all of these kind of NFT traders that can live without privacy for some reason. I don't understand why, but they can. When it comes to your life, to your job, to your other activities, people are much more aware of their privacy, which is good. And I think Beam is well suited to kind of be an infrastructure and a platform for these types of applications. And with that in mind, we decided to dedicate this hackathon at the end of August to building applications, decentralized applications on top of Beam using Nostr protocol, which I do suggest, look into it and kind of see what this community is doing, because I think they're doing a great job. Yeah, that's kind of sums it up. Feels weird without Gus, and I hope she will be back next week as usual and everything will go back to normal. But other than that, I think I'm done. And yeah, thank you very much for being here with us. Please keep asking questions and reminding us about things and participating. It's very great. And thank you. And have a great time of day. Bye-bye.